The knock on the door wasn't just a knock, it was a threat. A pounding, deliberate sound that echoed through the walls like a warning. Inside, a man named Marcus froze. He had heard about this before. The HOA had been on his back for months, twisting rules, inventing fines, sending letters filled with intimidation. But this was different. On the other side of his front door stood men dressed in dark uniforms, badges pinned to their chests, radios crackling. It looked like police, they acted like police. But something was wrong. Marcus felt his heart climb into his throat. He was a veteran himself. He knew authority. He knew how real cops carried themselves. And these men? Their posture was off, their words rehearsed, their eyes shifting nervously. They weren't there to protect. They were there to force. Open up. HOA Enforcement Division, one of them barked, his voice carrying the false confidence of a man hiding behind a costume. Marcus whispered to himself, Enforcement Division? That's not real. There's no such thing. But fear still gripped him because, real or not, they were outside his home, trying to break him. And here's where most people would have folded up in the door, begged for mercy, or simply walked away from their own house. But Marcus wasn't like most people. This was more than a home. This was land his grandfather had bought nearly 80 years ago. Land that carried stories of struggle and triumph. Land that had seen family cookouts, Sunday prayers, laughter, and tears. This wasn't just a property, it was a legacy. And Marcus wasn't about to let anyone, especially not fake cops hired by a homeowners association, steal that away. The men outside tried again. You're trespassing. This property is under HOA authority now. Step outside peacefully or we'll remove you by force. Every word was a lie, but it was spoken with a conviction that could fool the unprepared. They wanted him scared. They wanted him compliant. Marcus, however, knew the power of silence. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for his phone, not to dial 911 because deep down, he feared the local police might not even believe him. A black man calling about fake cops? He could imagine how quickly that would be dismissed. No, Marcus called a different number he hadn't dialed in years, a number he once swore he'd never use again. The phone rang once, twice, then a voice, calm and steady. Brother, is it time? Marcus swallowed hard. Yeah, it's time.
Outside, the fake officers began rattling the door handle, threatening
to detain him, but Marcus wasn't watching them anymore. He was watching the road, listening for something only he knew was coming. And then it happened. A low hum at first, like a storm rolling in. Tires crunching gravel, shadows moving fast. Within minutes, 6 figures emerged, silent, precise, unshakable. They weren't cops and they weren't neighborhood security. These were men Marcus had once served with, brothers forged in battle. Navy SEALs. They didn't come with sirens. They didn't come with noise. They came with presence, the kind of presence that makes liars tremble. The fake cops looked up, their confidence evaporating. Their cheap badges suddenly felt like plastic. Toys under the stare of men who had seen real war, who had carried real authority. One SEAL stepped forward, his voice low but cutting. You've got 3 seconds to explain who you really are. Before this gets ugly, the imposters froze. Their radios crackled with static, but no words came. The HOA had sent them here thinking intimidation would work. They hadn't planned for this. They hadn't planned for warriors standing guard over one man's right to his home. And in that instant, Marcus felt something shift. For months, he had been painted as the villain, the troublemaker, the rule breaker, the one the HOA wanted gone. But here, with his brothers at his side and cowards trembling at his gate, the truth was finally exposed. He wasn't. The problem is the resistance. And if you're listening right now, let me tell you something. What happened that night wasn't just about Marcus. It was about every single person who's ever felt powerless against a system that twists rules, invents authority, and tries to scare you out of what's yours. Stay with me, because this story is about to take a turn that even Marcus didn't see coming. What those fake cops did next will shock you, and what the SEALs did in response will leave you speechless. The air outside Marcus's home felt heavier than ever. The fake HOA cops, once loud and commanding, now stood frozen like actors caught mid-scene. sure if the play was over or if the audience had already seen through their performance. 6 seals formed a line without needing to speak, their mere presence enough to fracture the illusion of authority. The imposters had tried to weave, but here's the thing about bullies: they don't back down easy. Even when cornered, they double down on the lie. And that's exactly what happened next. The man with the biggest fake badge on his chest cleared his throat, forcing a smirk. "This is an official eviction order. We don't care who you call. You need to vacate this property immediately, or you'll be arrested for trespassing." One of the seals, broad-shouldered, his eyes like steel, stepped forward. He didn't shout. He didn't wave his arms. He simply said, "Show me the order." The imposter hesitated. His hand twitched at the folder he carried, then pulled out a stack of papers. It looked official, stamped, even signed. But as the seal scanned the pages, he shook his head slowly. Fake, wrong court seal, wrong judge, wrong everything. Marcus felt both relief and rage. Relief that someone finally said it aloud. Rage that the HOA had gone this far. They hadn't just bullied him with fines or empty threats. They had forged documents. They had dressed men in uniforms to terrify him into surrender. And that's when it hit him. This wasn't just an HOA gone wild. This was something deeper. Someone wanted his land badly enough to risk committing crimes in broad daylight. Before Marcus could process it, the fake cops grew restless. Their radios buzzed with nervous chatter, and one of them muttered, "This ain't worth it, man." But the leader snapped back, "Shut up. We finish this, or it's our necks on the line." Those words cut through Marcus like a blade. Their necks on the line, who was pulling the strings behind them, who had enough power to order this madness and expect loyalty. The seals shifted slightly, ready for whatever came next. And then chaos. One of the imposters lunged forward, trying to shove his way toward Marcus's porch. Before he even reached the first step, a seal intercepted, twisting his arm behind his back and forcing him to the ground with practiced ease. The others panicked, hands fumbling at their belts, not for real weapons, but for props. Rubber holsters, fake handcuffs, imitation batons. It was a charade unraveling at lightning speed. But Marcus wasn't cheering. He was shaking. Not from fear anymore, but from the realization of how close he had come to losing everything. If he hadn't trusted his instincts, if he had opened that door, if he had surrendered to the fake authority standing outside, his family's legacy would have been stripped away quietly, erased by paperwork. No one would have bothered to check. The leader of the imposters, now sweating under the weight of his collapsing scheme, spat venom toward Marcus. "You think this is over? You think 6 washed-up soldiers scare us? You don't know who you're messing with." And that was the moment the seal's demeanor changed. Until now, they had been defensive, controlled, a wall between Marcus and the threat. But those words, the arrogance, the threat against their brother, flipped a switch. One seal leaned in close to the leader, his voice low enough for only Marcus and the man to hear. "You're going to tell us who sent you. You're going to tell us why. And you're going to do it before the real cops arrive, because when they see those forged documents and those fake badges, you're not walking away." The imposters looked at each other, their fake uniforms suddenly feeling like prison jumpsuits. Their leader tried to stand tall, but his legs betrayed him, trembling with each step backward. And here's where things took another turn. Because as the imposters debated their next move, headlights cut through the darkness. Real police cars. Real sirens. Marcus's stomach dropped. Would they believe him? Would they believe the seals? Or would the HOA's forged documents be enough to make it look like he was the criminal? The cruisers pulled up fast, tires screeching. Officers stepped out, hands near their weapons, eyes scanning the scene. One of them barked, "What's going on here?" The fake cop straightened immediately, trying to blend into the illusion again. "We're handling an eviction," their leader said quickly, waving the forged papers. "We've got it under control." Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but one of the seals raised a hand, silently telling him, "Wait." Then, calm and steady, the seal addressed the officers. "These men are frauds. Check their credentials. Every one of them is carrying fake identification." For a moment, silence. The tension was suffocating. If the officers believed the imposters, Marcus could be cuffed and dragged away. But then, one officer took the papers, glanced at the seal, and frowned. He held it up to the cruiser's light. His partner shook his head. This is fake. Sloppy, too. The imposters' faces drained of color. Marcus felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. But just as he thought it was over, the leader laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. You still don't get it, do you? We're just the front line. You think arresting us changes anything? You think this little victory means you've won? The people behind this, they don't stop. They don't care about laws. They want this land, and they'll burn you out if they have to. The words sank like stones in Marcus's chest, because deep down, he knew the man wasn't bluffing. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning of something much bigger, much darker. The real police finally cuffed the imposters, reading them their rights as the SEALs stood watch. But Marcus barely heard the words. He was staring at the dirt beneath his feet, at the soil his grandfather had once tilled with his own hands. He could almost hear his grandfather's voice. This land is ours. Don't ever let them take it. And in that moment, Marcus made a vow. No matter what came next, no matter how powerful the enemy was, no matter what tricks they used, he wasn't backing down. The SEALs gathered around him, silent but present. One of them placed a hand on his shoulder. This isn't over, brother, but neither are we. And here's where you need to lean in, because what happened after this night would uncover a secret buried for decades. Secret that explained why the HOA wanted Marcus gone. A secret tied not just to money, not just to property, but to history itself. Stay with me, because the next chapter of this story is where everything explodes. The fight wasn't just about Marcus's home anymore. It was about a trap laid generations ago. It was about to be exposed. The imposters were gone, loaded into police cruisers, and driven off into the night. But the echo of their leader's words clung to the air like smoke. We're just the front line. Marcus stood on his porch, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles ached. The SEALs were beside him, quiet, watchful. But Marcus could feel it in their silence. They knew the truth. The fight had only begun, as the police wrapped up their reports and the flashing lights faded into the distance. One SEAL finally spoke. They weren't lying. Someone bigger is pulling the strings, and whoever it is, they won't stop. Marcus swallowed hard. Then why me? Why this house? Why my family's land? The SEAL looked him straight in the eye. That's what we're going to find out. The next morning, Marcus woke to a strange calm. Birds sang outside, sunlight spilled across the wooden floors, and for a split second, everything felt normal. But the moment he stepped outside, the illusion shattered. His mailbox was stuffed letters from the HOA, some dated weeks back, others fresh. Fines, violations, demands. Grass too long, fence too short. Paint the wrong shade. Absurd rules designed not to protect a neighborhood, but to push him out. Marcus ripped the letters open one by one, his frustration mounting, and then he froze. At the bottom of one letter, beneath the usual boilerplate threats, was a line that chilled him. This land has always belonged to us. Your family stole it. We're only taking back what's rightfully ours. His hand shook. It wasn't just harassment, anymore it was personal. He called the SEALs who had spent the night nearby. They gathered at his kitchen table, spreading the letters out like pieces of a puzzle. One of them, the quietest of the group, leaned forward. Look at the wording. They're not just after your house. They're after the land. That means there's something here, something worth more than property taxes or HOA fees. Another SEAL pulled out his laptop. Within minutes, he had maps of the county pulled up, overlaying old property lines with new development plans. There it was, clear as day. Marcus's land sat directly in the middle of a planned development project worth millions. A new shopping district, luxury homes, a golf course. His house's family's legacy was the last piece of the puzzle. They can't build without this land, the SEAL said, tapping the map. That's why they're desperate. That's why they sent those fake cops. Marcus felt fire in his chest. They weren't just trying to evict him, they were trying to erase his family's story for profit. But the deeper the SEALs dug, the darker it got. Courts showed something Marcus had never known 80 years ago. His grandfather hadn't just bought the land. He'd won it in a legal battle that had stripped it from a powerful developer's family. A family that had sworn revenge, and guess who sat on the board of Marcus's HOA? Descendants of that same family. It wasn't about violations. It wasn't about rules. It was about revenge, carried through generations. Fueled by greed and pride, Marcus staggered back, memories of his grandfather flooding his mind. The old man had always told him, "This land cost me more than money, but don't ever let it go." Now he understood why. His grandfather hadn't just bought property, he had fought for it. Marcus was now fighting the same war. But the HOA wasn't done playing games. That night, floodlights blazed across Marcus's yard. Trucks idled on the road. Men in suits, clipboards in hand, shouted about construction rights in eminent domain. They weren't hiding anymore. Marcus stormed out onto his porch. "You can't do this. This is my land," one man sneered. "Not for long. We'll tie you up in court until you drown in debt. Can't win." But Marcus wasn't alone anymore. The SEALs stepped forward, their presence halting the suits mid-step. One of them pulled out a camera, recording everything. "Say that?" Again, he dared. "Look into the lens and admit what you're doing." The suits faltered, realizing their threats were now evidence. But their leader smirked. "Evidence won't matter. Money talks louder than truth." Marcus's rage boiled over. "Then let's see who the people believe." The next day, with the SEALs' help, Marcus went live. He told his story, every detail. The fake cops, the forged documents, the generational feud, the land his grandfather fought for. His voice cracked as he spoke, but he didn't hide it. He wanted people to feel the pain, the injustice, the weight of what was being stolen. The video spread like wildfire. Neighbors, once silent or complicit, began to show up at his gate with food, water, and words of encouragement. Strangers online sent messages of support. And slowly, the narrative shifted. Marcus wasn't the troublemaker anymore. He was the man standing against corruption. The man refusing to bow. The man fighting for his family's legacy. The HOA panicked. Their threats escalated. Anonymous letters slipped under his door. Phone calls in the middle of the night. But Marcus didn't flinch. He had something stronger than fear. Now he had truth. And he had an army of voices behind him. The final showdown came on a stormy evening. HOA had called an emergency meeting to vote on forcibly seizing Marcus's property. He wasn't invited, but he showed up anyway, SEALs at his side. Camera rolling. The board members sneered, confident in their power. But as Marcus stood before them, he pulled out the letters, the maps, the evidence of fraud and corruption. And then he did something none of them expected. He read his grandfather's words. A letter written decades ago, discovered in an old box the SEALs had found while searching his attic. In it, his grandfather warned of this very moment. "Will come for this land again. They will lie, they will cheat, they will steal. If you are reading this, stand firm. This land is not just soil. It is the proof that we endured. It is the legacy they cannot erase." The room fell silent. Even the storm outside seemed to hush. Marcus's voice shook, but it carried power. "You can take me to court. You can send fake cops. You can send threats. But you will not take this land. Not today. Not ever." And then, one by one, neighbors who had once turned away began stepping into the room. They had seen his video. They had heard his story. And now, they stood with him. The HOA's power fractured that night. Their threats, their lies, their generational grudge, it all collapsed under the weight of truth and unity. Marcus walked home through the rain, exhausted but unbroken. The SEALs walked beside him, silent guardians. As he reached his porch, he looked out at the land stretching before him, glistening in the storm. He could almost see his grandfather standing there, smiling, nodding, and Marcus whispered, "Kept the promise. If you've listened this far, you need to hear this. Marcus's story is not just his, it's ours." Every time someone with power thinks they can strip away your home, your dignity, your history, it's a fight we all share. Don't let anyone tell you you're powerless. Don't let anyone convince you that you don't belong. Because when You stand your ground when you hold on to what matters. You become more than a fighter. You become a legacy. So if this story hit you, don't scroll past. Share it. Let others know that lies and intimidation only win when good people stay silent. And if you're standing in your own fight right now, remember, you are not alone. Stay strong. Stay unshakable. And never let them take what's yours, asterisk.